Just,
short questions.
You know, the difference of opinion depends on what comes first, the fact or the declaration. Unfortunately, after 1917, after the Balfour Declaration, I think for 1 or 2 or 3 years, the British took it seriously. The ones who didn't take it seriously were the Jews of the world. They didn't come to Palestine in big numbers. The Third Aliyah was small, and they did not establish a fact in Israel that could have provided them with really the rule of the country. And the British gave, for instance, the right to establish electricity to a Jew, the right to develop the Dead Sea Works by another Jew, Novometsky, and the Jews didn't come. They only came when they were pushed. But now the situation is different. We have 6.5 million Jews in the western part of Palestine. If you take the number of Jews who live in the West Bank, the number is 400,000. The politicians like to say 450,000, but the Department of Statistics says 400,000. Of this, at least 100,000 are Haredim, ultra-Orthodox, who live there only because they have apartments there. Give them an apartment someplace else, they will move. So ideological settlers, there are about 300,000 out of 6.5 million people. So
Yuval, let's go down the question.
Conclusion. What should I conclude
The
from
question
that?
is, wait.
the question is, how do you interpret the power of 6.5 million people in western part of Palestine to establish their own state without the fear that one day they will be overtaken by the majority of the Arab population?
Thank you. That's a good question.
Thank you. There is no Arab majority west of the Jordan River, and if we take the numbers seriously, the expectation that there will become a majority is detached from reality known to us. And the reason is a very impressive rise in the so-called fertility rate, excuse me ladies for using this technicality, or in the average number of children in a Jewish family, and the very dramatic decline of the number of children in an Arab family, both in Judea and Samaria and within the state of Israel. Very dramatic.
Will you give
For
me
19,
Yuval,
you use statistics. For 1915, the average number of children in an Arab family in Israel was 3.1, and the average number of a Jewish family was 3.1, and just slightly higher than that. And that is a tendency that you, with your education and your experience, can readily explain. It has to do with better education. It has to do with mobile phones. It has to do with the expressed desire of Arab mothers for to see their daughters, especially their daughters, building a different and better future for their families. And we see it all around. The number of female Arab students in Israel is higher, as with the Jews, is higher than with the boys, with the other students. And the number of Arab girls, high school girls, who take natural sciences, math and computers in, say, in the triangle, I'm not sure about the Galilee, but maybe also, is higher than the number of the boys. I think it says something about the future. And I don't see that you can expect a turnaround, this tendency to turn around. Therefore, please do not threaten us with demography. I think it has never been the case, but demographers and statisticians have been doing this since 1967. It has not happened yet. And the number of people coming on Aliyah is on the increase. And you have your own, you can produce your own reasons for that. So that's not an argument.
But he was also asking, let's say it's 40%. Would you give them the right to vote?
What about 40 and 60%?
What about it? They are not
allow 40% Knesset members to be Arabs?
Did I say that?
Why not?
Did I say that?
No, so what
Did I propose it?
No, so
Did I propose the extension of our jurisdiction over Judea and Samaria in response to your question, to the question here?
No.
I didn't say that.
So what will
They're there.
What will be the
I'm
status?
sorry?
What will be the status of these people?
I don't think that in the foreseeable future the status of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria and Gaza will be all, the legal status will be all that different from their status today. I do hope that with a decline in terrorism, we'll be able to see to it that they live under better conditions. Let us remember that 20 years ago, before the Oslo Agreement, tens of thousands of them came on a daily basis from Gaza to work in Israel and win bread for the families. And today, even today, they come from Judea and Samaria. But let's see what they do have, which I didn't expect them to have. They voted to a parliament. They didn't repeat it. In the free vote of the parliament, I think observed from high up by President Carter, free, fair elections, they voted Hamas into plurality. They have a president, never elected after 2006. And they have, again, a president, a parliament, ambassadors all around the world, maybe 150 of them. They take care of their day-to-day dealings in their municipalities. That's the best, from their point of view, they can have under the conditions as we know it. I don't know about the future. Again, I have my own expectations and desires. But suppose that instead of myself, there would be my colleague and friend Bush Herzog here. He's unable to reach an agreement with the PLO. My friend and colleague Zehava Galon, being the Prime Minister, she would not have been able, she would not be able to reach an agreement. I would refer you to a short and very realistic observation by another colleague of mine in the Knesset, who says time and again, the maximum that any Israeli government can propose falls short of the minimum that the PLO can expect, that can accept. Who says that? Ahmad Tibi, the special advisor to Nobel Peace Prize laureate Yasser Arafat. I think he's correct on the dot. So what can we do? No unilateral withdrawal, extension of jurisdiction from that point of view doesn't make a real difference, but if I may quote, you refer to the real Begin, if I quote the real Begin, his position was that once you extend your jurisdiction to a place, to a territory in which people are not willing to accept your rule, you must also accompany it by an option to citizenship. An option. as was the case in Jerusalem. Hitherto, in the last 49 years, only few of them assumed citizenship. However, we should take into account other possibilities that many of them would do. This would be one reason for a prudent person to be careful in taking such bold steps. Although, as I said, in principle, we have perfect right to do it. But we have to observe life as it is.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. The Balfour Declaration has often been described, in Britain at least, as the biggest mistake of British diplomacy ever made. I'm just wondering whether it really was...
I'm sorry, you consider it to be...
No, I didn't say that. I said in Britain.
In Britain, בבריטניה חושבים ככה.
Some.
Yes.
Some.
Often.
There is a special internet site for it.
Yes.
Apologize. Okay.
The point is, what I'm asking is whether it was in fact useful for the Jews, given the fact that there was quite a lot of immigration for 3 decades before World War I, the Balfour Declaration, and as you've well pointed out, it actually dropped off in the years just after the Balfour Declaration was made. And of course, it served as a marker to the Arab world to say imperialism is taking over. And already in 1920, 21, there were riots against Jewish immigration, despite the fact that there were fewer Jews in the country than there were in 1914.
Of course.
So I just want to know what your opinion is about the usefulness of the Balfour Declaration to the Jews. I could add one more point. I mean, Yasser Arafat, said that we will accept any Jew who was here before the Balfour Declaration.
Right.
It served as a marker which set off the problem.
Again,
Right.
I think this would bolster my basic interpretation of reality as I see it. Yes, those of us, I'm not sure about their descendants. I'm saying that because my dear father-in-law arrived to Eretz Israel, Palestine, exactly 100 years ago. He was a child. He was brought in by his parents near Kinneret at the Poria, with the Poria group. So how about my wife? She is his daughter. Would she be allowed to stay here? Or I don't know. I think that, at least at the time, it was considered to be useful, although Mr. Weizmann was greatly disappointed by the wording. He was disappointed, or the main point of this disappointment had to do with the very exact wording. They discussed it for several months in the cabinet, and Minister Montague was not very helpful in this respect, not despite being a Jew, being a Jew. And what they wanted to have is a letter saying Palestine as a national home. And the British were more careful than that, and said national home in Palestine. And Mr. Weizmann was quoted to have said, I have not prayed to this baby. לא לילד הזה פיללתי. And there were other issues there. It was, to an extent, rectified, not in this point, but to a large extent rectified by the 1922 resolution by the League of Nations, expressly referring to the historical ties of Jews to their homeland. As I said, the reconstitution of their national home. I would say that because some of us in Israel, Jews, time and again say, "Oh, come on, historical background is not a valid political argument. The Bible is an irrelevant document." For these non-Jews in the League of Nations and non-Jews like Lloyd George, It was actually the document on which they based their, should I say, their Zionistic approach. So yes, historical connection is an important argument.
Last one.
But then, of course, when they betrayed their mandatory promise, it became far more difficult than Jews at the time expected. Jabotinsky was optimistic about the British fairness that would ultimately be shown up in their actions until 1939, actually, until the war. He was optimistic.
George, last one.
But then the white paper of McDonald came about and say, that's it, no aliyah, no immigrants, 75,000 or what. It was actually repeated after World War II.
George,
So,
last one.
But please note when I'm asked these questions, I'm a geologist. I've never taken any course, 1 hour of course, in history or law or sociology or psychology, all these requisites that are so important for a public person. I'm a geologist.
Okay.
So be
George.
careful with my quotations.
George.
And I'm an old guy. I'm the oldest member of Knesset. I did not include that in the CV. It was hard work. I invested all my talents in becoming the older member of Knesset.
And you're happy? And you're happy
sorry?
there?
You get to be the next Knesset speaker in the interim.
No, that's not the rule. No.
Move to.
The person, the law was changed because of a certain unpleasant experience. The person who opens a new Knesset is now the veteran, and the veteran is my friend Amir Peretz, because in the last 30 years I've been in and out, so I totaled 17 years, that's it. Okay.
Okay, George,
But I'm the
please.
oldest. Yeah.
George, please.
Thank you. I'm a physicist, and I attended the great event when your father was celebrating with President Carter the celebration of the success of the negotiations with Egypt in the late 70s. I am a Jerusalemite, I'm a physicist, I'm a refugee. I listened to your presentation, and I listened with a view to seeing how deep is your concern about the future of Israel. And my understanding from your father was that he was laying the foundations for a peaceful agreement with the Palestinians, whether it comes through an agreement by inviting people to become citizens or by other means. I also understood from what I have read, from what you've written, that you also are looking for new ways to resolve this conflict and not to let it be sustained until our grandchildren, our great-great-grandchildren will still find a solution for it. With that in mind, after all that you've said, can you tell us very briefly what you would like to see realistically happen? What would you like the Palestinians to say to you in order for you to say, we are ready to sit down and negotiate honorably and to end this conflict?
Thank you.
Sitting down for direct negotiations, not through a Paris futile parley, of course, is an important in the relationship between two groups that live together, have lived together, and will live together. We're not going to evaporate, and they're not going to evaporate in whatever future will be. I think what I was trying to impress upon you is that we must be practical, and in practicality, no agreement is possible. If you mention Prime Minister Begin, what he proposed was autonomy, self-rule. And I would refer to Mr. Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin, in his last speech in the Knesset in October of 1995, because before he was so brutally murdered by this scoundrel, he said that what he proposes when they discussed the Oslo II chapter and an agreement. And what he sees in his mind, I'm quoting almost verbatim, is an Arab political entity, an Arab independent political entity, which is not a state. She'einena medina. I don't know what you would have said today. People sometimes tell me what Menachem Begin would have said today, exactly, in the exact wording. This word, the other way, okay. Poor guy's turning around, as they say, in his grave in the Mount of Olives. Some people say, he must be turning in his grave today, leftwards. And then next week, he must be turning rightwards. So I don't know what Prime Minister Rabin, of course, would have said even 2 years after this statement. But I heard him several times. I heard him saying that in the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. I remember myself telling him, but there's no such animal. If it's independent, it's a state. So I don't know if he really thought it to the end of it. But he made it a point to say, not a state. I adhere to that. Not a state. I would repeat what I said to one of my colleagues, a person of important status in Israel about in 2008, when I said, everything functional from my point of view, without knowing, is agreeable from my point of view. Everything functional, nothing territorial. That's my position. Others who think otherwise, who would say everything functional and everything territorial, tried it already in vain. So it's not in the cards, it's not in reality, it's not with us. I'm not concerned about the future of Israel. I'm concerned about our security. I'm concerned about economy. I'm concerned about terrorism that does and will, God forbid, cause us great difficulties and burials of victims.
Rule of law.
And people being maimed. But that's not where the strength of the state of Israel is. We have sustained that for so many years, and with such encompassing, brutal, total wars, that the conclusion must be, yes, we can. They cannot have an agreement with my liberal, left-leaning colleagues in the Knesset. The PLO cannot have an agreement, and they cannot have an agreement with the PLO. But as a country, we go from strength to strength. If you just want, Yuval, this is for you. If you take one parameter, it's not the only parameter, maybe not the most important, but it says something about national strength. Take GDP per capita. Look at the graph. 1950, $5,000. Corrected. PPP. Corrected. Today, $37,000. With all the problems and with poverty line, etc. If you look at the graph, you see two bumps. One in 67, 68, because of the war and the economic burden that we had to sustain, and one in 1974. You see it decreasing and then increasing, then decreasing again, but it does not interfere with the average increase. It's a fascinating graph, because you could see our history on this economic graph. I didn't mention it. I've never taken any class in economy, so I tell it to you at this moment. So no, I think that on this basis, and on the basis of increasing and better education for Arab minority here, Arab citizens here, and within the Arabs in Judea and Samaria, I'm not sure about Gaza, maybe even there, increased education brings better prospects for understanding what is really important for a family. I don't belittle national hopes and aspirations, but under the circumstances, this is the very best we can do, and I think We should be optimistic.
And on this happy note, thank you very
On this
much.
optimistic note,
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Begin, for excellent presentation. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again.
if I have something new to tell you,